Okay, so in the last video, this is where we ended off before it timed out, and as you can see, I'm finished cutting out my number 1 pattern piece, and it's pretty sides together. And I was just saying that it's really important that you do have the pretty sides together, so that way you have a left and a right. And I was comparing it to the mitten project, how some people, when it came to the pretty sides and the ugly sides, or what the pattern refers to as the right and the wrong sides, if you mix those up, what you can end up having is 2 lefts or 2 rights. And the last thing we want is 2 right legs. So make sure you've got 2 pieces cut out, pretty sides together. So the next piece we have to cut out is pattern piece number 2. And pattern piece number 2 is to be cut out again, 2 of them. And so I've got this leftover piece of fabric from what I have cut out. You can see the cut lines here of what I've cut out. And I'm going to lay this pattern piece on here. Now I'm going to later on make reference to saving fabric, so you can imagine that if we can save fabric, that's a pretty big chunk of fabric to save. So I'll show you how we can save some. So okay, let's get into cutting pattern piece number 2. So I've laid it out here along the top edge, just below the salvaged edge. And I'm just pointing out that, look, after I've laid it out, there's still enough room for 1 more, 2 more, 3 more ties. If somebody else or multiple people were using the same fabric as me, we could lay all of our ties out on this one piece, and then this big piece of fabric would be left over from each of their projects. Okay, so working on pattern piece number 2, I'm going to go from my guide and I'm going to measure with my tape measure from that guide to the salvage edge. And that's 1 inch there, and on the other end, again, it's 1 inch, so I'm going to pin it. And I'm going to secure it with a few more pins. This time I got smart and I started pinning it parallel as I recommended in the last video. And here I am cutting it out. So here I have it cut out, and I've just cut that folded edge off because they originally asked for it to be cut that way. And again, as you can see, I could even lay 1 more, 2 more, 3 more ties of somebody else's, and that would mean we'd save fabric, and that's a good thing. So here I am pointing at the pattern instructions, and it's always good to verify before you move on. So the pattern instructions had it laid out like this. So I had the number 2 and the number 1, and I had 2 of these and 2 of those. And there's that pattern instructions, and there's a photograph here, a drawing, and here's the blow up of it, where it has the number 2, 2 of them, and number 1, 2 of them on a double thickness. So here it is. So the next thing we're going to have to do is do the markings. Now these markings that are on here, we've got 2 dots and a buttonhole to transfer these markings onto our fabric. So I'm going to use a pin, and I'm going to put it in the center of the dot, and you can flip it all the way over, and where it comes out the other side, right where it exits the fabric, that's where you can take your pen or pencil, or you can even use a tailor's tack with thread and mark it right at that place. Now here I am using a marker that actually disappears with an iron, and I really love this one, but it was not the best choice, and so I ended up having to change it to a blue pencil, which washes out, because I'm going to need to press this area, and obviously I don't want to lose all of my markings, so you'll see how I had to just draw over top of that again. But for now, didn't realize it, so here I am with my marking pen, and I'm making the little dot right where the pin came out, and I'm going to make it on the top and the bottom, and again the top and the bottom. So those are the 2 dots, and now I'm going to work on the buttonhole. And as you can see, this is where I got smart and realized, oh, I'm going to end up with a problem. So I've changed over to this marking pencil, and I've marked off my buttonhole. So here is the buttonhole marking, and I did it the same way where I put the pin through and it came out the other side, and that's how I did the marking for the other side of the fabric. So what we're going to need is a little bit of support for that button. So this little piece of fabric here is interfacing, and one side of it is got kind of like a sticky glue, and it activates with an iron. So when you press it, the heat basically melts that glue against your fabric and fuses them together. So you end up getting a little extra support, and we're going to need that for the button. So here I've laid it out over top of the buttonhole. You can probably not see it on the video, but the faint blue lines of the buttonhole are right here. So if I move it over a little bit, you can see the dots from the markings that we've made, and the buttonhole markings are right here. So I've positioned it just over this edge, and you don't need much, like, I don't know, maybe that's 2 inches by 2 inches. So I've positioned it. I made sure that the shiny side with little dots of glue is facing down against my fabric. So again, it's facing down. If this side had the glue, down against my fabric, so that when I press it, I'm not going to stick this to the bottom of my iron. That happens. So here I am, my iron's on top. I'm doing one side at a time. So here's the other piece for my other buttonhole. So I've got the piece underneath here, and I'm giving it a light press. You can use steam at this point as well if you wish. And then I'm doing the other side, which is the other buttonhole. When you're doing something like this, you're going to put the iron on it, and you hold it down for about 10 to 15 seconds to make sure that you've got enough heat that the glue is going to stick. You might also want to consider using a pressing cloth to protect your fabric, so that way if that 10 to 15 minutes is too long and too hot, you don't scorch your fabric. Best you scorch a pressing cloth than ruin your fabric. So here we have it. There is that little piece of extra support for our buttonhole, and there's one side and the other, and you can see my notches here. So this is one leg, and that's my other leg. So I'm getting ready to sew, and I think getting ready to sew means another chunk of video. So we're going to leave that for next time. Bye-bye.